Thank you for coming to my talk. In a manner of speaking, I apologize for speaking quickly. Note that these slides are available at the URL shown in the lower left corner of each slide. Each slide also shows the icons with its easy license under which I'm releasing the slide deck in case anyone does a screen grab and wants to know what their reuse rights are for this work. The place where I'm living right now does not have a traditional land acknowledgements. I could say that I worked on some of the things I will talk about when I lived in the traditional unceded lands of the Ute and Arapaho peoples. For the others who lived on that land included the Cheyenne, Comanche, and Apache. For more information, I recommend consulting the Colorado Tribal Acknowledgement List. But actually, I think a different acknowledgement is probably better coming from me, as in particular at this moment in history. You see, while I am entirely non-religious, I am of entirely Jewish ancestry, so I want to add my voice to others who are identified as Jewish by society around us, no matter our own religious feelings or lack thereof, in saying that what Israel is doing in Palestine is genocide and must stop. Okay, I believe that one of the very important roles of scholars is to speak the truth, which is why I've been using the F-bomb a lot lately, meaning I've been using the word fascism a lot. There's an argument that we, in open education, should at this moment be concentrating on what we can do under the menace of fascist control. There's also an argument that what we can do best in our own fight against rising fascism is to be better educators, to teach our students true history, to know what humans have really done, true science, to know what the world really is like, and better critical thinking skills so that we'll be harder targets for fascist indoctrination. Arguably, many of us at this conference are best at using, well, the more effective and liberatory practices of open education and at supporting the creation of excellent and affordable, free resources which will enable even today's struggling students to maximize their chances to get those benefits of education I just mentioned. So I'm going to narrow my focus just for the next 9 minutes to those practical tasks of open education. In particular, before it all went up in flames, as a community we used to worry a lot about how to make open education more sustainable, which makes me ask the question, what are we trying to sustain? One answer would be things like this. These are just some of the book-shaped OER on which I have worked. They are wonderful books which will have enormous benefit to the students in Washington, Oregon, and Massachusetts, and through the miracle of openness and potentially far afield from the west coast of the U.S. Most of them are many hundreds of pages, which, including the many revisions books tend to go through, is where I got to the 17,000 pages of my title. I chose to display these ones in particular because they look like textbooks, in fact rather beautiful textbooks thanks to the Pressbooks platform. It was my great pleasure to work with the Open Washington and Open Oregon groups in the last few years, helping to move the books to Pressbooks for their students. For the other two books, I had the pleasure of working with Rebus as a facilitator of the Textbook Success Program, as it was called at that time, but I was not deeply involved in getting them into Pressbooks. Note on this slide, UI means user interface, and WYSIWYG stands for what you see is what you get. Before they were in Google Docs, I will call the transfer from Google Docs to Pressbooks to be the Google Docs to Pressbooks flow. Why is this process so common in OpenEd, you may ask? Well, this slide shows some of the features of those two platforms that OpenEd folks appreciate. But moving from one to the other is not easy. While I could do an entire presentation about the Google Docs to Pressbook flow, I have done this presentation. My aim instead is to try to learn some big lessons from sustainability of OER projects from this experience. Let me give you a 2-minute tour first of the specific issues that made this work challenging. Two such famous platforms provide a platform of export and import. Surely it just works. There's an export here to Word and import of Word. Surely we can just use Word and go from one to the other. It turns out this doesn't work. It fails in several important respects. The most important one where it just doesn't just work is that all text for images in the Google Docs get lost. I think the loss is happening in the Google Doc exports, which is just part of Google's enshittification, I guess, to use Cory Doctorow's recently coined word. Additionally, there are features on both platforms that we want to match, like embedded videos and Pressbooks glossary terms. The program's way to do this would be to add some decorations to the Google Doc files, which make a kind of lightweight markup language. Apparently, markup languages are very scary to non-programming humans. Open Oregon's Phoebe Daria and I used to say, but writing in mathematics and street science and so much around us uses markup language, so I guess I feel like we could try to get over that fear. Anyway, when you do export the file from Google Docs instead as an HTML, it produces something which is in a markup language. It's an ugly one. This particular book goes on for 1.6 megabytes of HTML, all on one line, filled with HTML features that are ugly and hard to interpret. But it's all text. And we can process a lot of ugly HTML because and any new markup language we may have added to the Google Doc itself using code, since it's all just text. HTML is just plain text files. This is actually easier than processing a Google Doc file, which can only be done through the WYSIWYG interface, the graphical user interface to Google Docs. When we're done processing these text files, we can upload a nice Pressbooks adapted HTML file to Pressbooks graphical user interface using a tool such as the one I like, which is called Selenium, which is a tool that's often used to stress test websites and other related web design features. Okay, and now all of the bullets on this page, on this slide, are nice things we can do now that we are processing the text of an OER in its HTML form, the text form. A few particularities. For example, I'm suggesting we can make attribution statements. Well, Pressbooks does make attribution statements, but it handles only fairly limited situations, and it's pretty easy to do a much better job of attributions. I did add a feature in one set of books I built where it makes QR codes for the print versions of OER that then can be used for students to find videos when they scan them with their phone if they're reading the book offline, but do have a phone that can access the internet. So I think it's a pretty cool feature. Another thing we can do is correct figure numbering, section numbering. Humans are very bad at counting, so figure numbers and section numbers are often quite wrong, but we can make computers are good at counting, so we can fix those sorts of things. I should say, when I did this work, I'm very grateful to OpenRGR and Open Washington for paying me to do this work. I think there was a lot of money to be spent for the benefits it gained, so I really would like to argue that they shouldn't have paid me at all, and we shouldn't be doing this approach. But anyway, but at least the benefit of this experience, comparing to my other OER creation adoption experiences, there may be lessons that we can learn for sustainability in general. So some pain points on this multi-platform approach to OER are on this slide. Things about interoperation is a really important one. Surveillance capitalism happening under Google Docs. Heavyweight solution to a lightweight problem on the Pressbooks slide. These are all issues I think are quite serious. I also like to point out in particular the bullet at the bottom of this slide that the obsession with OER as objects has led to a misplaced desire to emulate commercial textbook publication processes since they produce such beautiful objects. Anyway, this discussion all fails when under rising fascism, we will all have no funds to support folks' salary monies where we have much greater student need. But anyway, the pre-lapsarian scenario of where there was some money around doing OER and a desire to run centralized OER services, and in that context, I suppose we do want to understand how to choose the best platforms and set up the best processes. I hear some points on this. I think this era is gone for good, as I have said, but if there's any remnant of it that remains, please come back and look at this slide to think about the suggestion. For example, brave little California is still fighting the good fight and has funded OER in the community college system of California. They just made a big choice about a major platform where their OER will preferentially live. I sure hope they thought about the issues on this slide, particularly interoperability. I have a lot of concerns about that. Okay, but what do we do after the fall? As fascism rises, there's much less funding for education of any form, certainly funding of OER. I would argue the era of well-funded large OER replication projects is probably over. That could be a good thing. I've certainly argued that the obsession with replicating the structures of commercial publishing, while perhaps a good first step for our movement, is not one that has a future. This is likely true, if nothing else, because of fascism, but it's also true, probably a good thing. I've used the phrase "the beauty of ugly OER" at the first OER I attended in 2019. I think that idea is more salient today. That what matters is the pedagogy of an OER, not the house style or fancy platform under which it's useful. So I'd like us to concentrate back on the pedagogy, and that is a way forward. Many examples of this in my own work have occurred. A student-built collaborative textbooks using MediaWiki. The CSU Pueblo World Languages program has a huge website with amazing variety of amazing OER on a variety of different platforms. They're all kind of ugly. I don't think my colleagues would be mad at me for saying that, but they're highly effective pedagogically. One last comment, I strongly disagree that the way to build pretty OER without our formal levels of funding is to hand over their creation to a generative AI tool. I think that's a really wrong way to go, although a prominent figure in the open-end movement has suggested that anyway. But my analysis of why there's a terrible solution to our community's problems of sustainability will have to appear in another forum. Thank you for your attention. Please feel free to contact me in any way shown on this slide. For example, I'm happy to talk about how AI is not a solution to the problems that ail us, but rather a deep worsening of those problems if you reach out to me. Thank you very much.